20 families affected by the Boksburg gas tanker explosion are intending to file a class action lawsuit. That explosion on Christmas Eve has claimed the lives of 38 people. So a Johannesburg-based law firm says they've been instructed by the families to set the legal action in motion against infinite fleet transport. So how exactly will a case of this magnitude unfold? Well, let's get you some insight from the law firm involved. We're joined in studio by class action litigation expert with RH Lawyers. That's Zain Lundell, who's live to us from our studios today. It's great to have you on the program, Zain. Thanks very much indeed for popping by. It's a devastating story, and many of us are still trying to make sense of how something like this could happen. But I imagine, of course, you're dealing with families with varying extents of loss, so to speak. What exactly are the claimants asking you to do?
Yeah, so there's 25 people that have approached us to set in motion legal proceedings. The type of harm varies. So we have obviously and very unfortunately some severely injured individuals who have approached us to assist them. Those individuals would generally claim damages for past and future loss of income, past and future medical expenses, and then something else called general damages, which is really payment for the pain and suffering that they've been through related to their injuries. There are others who have unfortunately lost loved ones or those who were supporting them financially. So, a couple of, children, for example, who have lost parents. They will be able to claim for what's called loss of support. So basically, they've lost a support structure and they now do not receive any financial support from that person who has unfortunately passed away. They will be able to claim damages for that. And then third group of claimants are those who have had either damage to their property or damage to their vehicles, who would be able to claim monetary damages for that. And the fourth group of claimants are those who unfortunately witnessed very disturbing and gruesome events, and they will be able to claim general damages and other sorts of damages flowing from mental anguish related to the incident.
Sure. Yeah. Safe to say that most of this relates to monetary compensation. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, so I think it's an important distinction. Generally, law firms claim, are involved in civil litigation. Civil litigation is where you claim monetary damages for harm that's been occasioned to you by somebody else's negligent conduct.
Right.
Criminal proceedings are really what the state is tasked with attending to. Private law firms do not, generally speaking, bring criminal, proceedings against individuals unless there's a private prosecution. But before private prosecution occurs, the state must, first show that it does not intend, pursuing criminal action. Yes. So our firm is really, involved and one, it's skilled at, and two, assisting these claimants with civil claims against the wrongdoers.
Right. Yeah, believe it or not, we've learned a lot about private prosecution,
yes,
given what's taking place with the president, but I digress.
Yes.
I imagine there's also going to be a lot of interest in trying to ascertain how you quantify that kind of compensation, especially in the case where there's been a loss of life.
Yeah, so I think it's a very complicated thing to do. Fortunately, our law firm is well versed in this type of work. It's work that we do for many other individuals. So we've got, other class actions that we work on where people have been injured. And it really involves, getting claimants to go through a very, a process of engaging medical experts and actuaries to quantify what their harm is, especially that harm or those damages going forward. They're difficult to quantify. Right. Small errors can make a very big difference in the value of someone's claim, and we engage those experts and assist our clients, obviously, to make sure that we do the best possible job for them. The other important thing is that generally we take, and for example, this case we take on a no-win, no-fee basis, but not only that, we pay for all the medical experts and the reports up front. So it's importantly these clients, will go through this process and will not have to fork out funds which they obviously don't have at this stage given what's happened to them. And we will, make sure that they get the best experts and, we do the work that's required to make sure that at the end of the day, the case we put forward is best possible for them. Financial constraints shouldn't be an impediment.
It might be an obvious question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You're obviously already quite heavily invested in seeing this through. Your level of confidence of these families being able to get this compensation on the other side of this process?
Look, I mean, we wouldn't take on a case that we were not confident about. We run this case on a no-win, no-risk basis, and we generally fork out a significant sum of cash to make sure we run these cases properly. I can't guarantee an outcome, obviously, but what we can say is that we've looked very carefully at this case, and there's still certainly a lot more investigation that needs to be done. But from what we see, there are certainly parties that are liable. I think in the media there have been some suggestions that an auditor has absolved certain parties from liability or said they've done nothing wrong. I find that very difficult to believe. The incident occurred on the 24th of December. That audit report came out, I think, early January, maybe late December. I'm not 100% sure, but certainly very soon thereafter. And there's still a lot of unknown questions. So perhaps that audit report looked at very specific questions. And that might be the case, but there's certainly a lot of other questions that either remain unanswered or questions that we've looked at where we see as definitely an ability to prove negligence against certain parties.
Are you able to take us through perhaps some of the most salient questions you still have?
Yeah, well, I think the question...
Without prejudicing...
Yeah, without prejudicing clients. Look, I won't take us through questions that we still have, but I think I can broadly set out who we think may be liable and on what basis. Of course, there's certainly a lot more investigation that needs to be done. But, we have the staffing company who provided the driver to the tanker company. Staffing company, it seems to us that the driver in question was not trained adequately. Now, for example, the manner in which the bridge was measured, the height of the bridge was measured, it was incorrectly done. Did the driver have the necessary skills and training, and did he know what to do if he diverted from a route incorrectly? We don't know this. We would have to, attend to the necessary investigations and see whether we think the staffing company has done what it needed to do to ensure it's placing suitably qualified drivers to companies like the tanker company. The tanker company then obviously has a duty to ensure that the driver stays en route and also provide the necessary support to the driver. Whether that was done adequately, especially, what we're thinking is this is the 24th of December, a lot of companies are working on skeleton staff. That's something that we'd have to look at. And a whole bunch of other questions arise from the manner in which the tanker company, conducted itself and ensured, for example, that emergency services were, at the scene and also conducted themselves adequately given the nature of the cargo that was being carried. Highly flammable, highly dangerous.
Right.
And we then also have, emergency services who, a lot have been said about how they didn't adequately, ensure that persons were removed from the scene and at a safe distance. There's a lot to be answered there. And finally, the party responsible for the signage on the bridge. And not just that, I think, my colleague mentioned on an interview yesterday, it's not just the signage on the bridge. There may be a requirement or there may be something to look at where, signage before the bridge, warning, for example, trucks.
Right.
Before they hit that incline, that look, this is a low-lying bridge, be careful.
Sure.
So it seems to us that the tanker got down to the bottom and then realized, I'm probably not in a good position, the driver. Those things all need to be looked at, and this comes back to my point of, proper investigation needs to be done. It can't be done in 2 or 3 weeks, as has been suggested.
Right. From my understanding, PRASA is also another potentially liable stakeholder. You'll tell us why, as well as the Metro. What kind of accountability do you reckon needs to be directed at them? Yeah,
so, is PRASA responsible for the signage on the bridge? It may very well likely be. If the signage was stolen, PRASA, for example, put up the signage, then the question becomes, well, does PRASA adequately maintain its signage? Does it go out and check that its signage is in order every so often? Are there records of that? These are all questions that have not been answered, and we don't know the answers to them yet. But these are things that we will obviously investigate. There's many other questions, of course, but I won't go further into
Sure, fair enough. You don't need me to tell you that this can take quite some time, right? If your experience is anything to go by, if history is anything to go by, we could be dealing with this case for years. Difficult to digest that in a context where people may be dealing with worsening medical conditions.
Sure.
In some instances, God forbid, some of them may pass on.
Yeah.
In what ways could that complicate the case?
Look, it is very unfortunate. What we are trying to do is engage with NGOs to assist families with the immediate assistance that they need now. You know, we would always like to do more, but unfortunately that just isn't possible. There are financial constraints, there are capacity constraints. But we think the best way in which to move this forward is, you know, from an immediate needs perspective, work with the families and NGOs to make sure they have food on the table. Children are going to school. Children's school fees are being paid. You know, those basic things that I think, you know, us as a law firm assisting these families can really assist these clients with. And then the other side is making sure that the parties are held accountable for what has happened. I personally think that this was a very preventable disaster. The magnitude of this disaster is saddening, you know. And our job then as a law firm is to make sure that we run these cases effectively, we put the best case forward for our clients that we can, and obtain the compensation that they deserve.
Yeah, I'm a bit reluctant to ask typically what kind of compensation you'd look for in these kind of circumstances. You'll tell me if you can actually conjure up an answer to that. Yeah. Because as we started off by mentioning, the families have experienced varying levels of loss, for lack of a better term, and that's going to inform, of course, the kind of compensation that they're eligible for. Yeah,
so I think, you know, it comes back to my point earlier that, you know, medical experts and actuaries, you know, do a lot of complicated work in conjunction with the attorneys to assess and quantify the values of the claims. You know, I've had clients come in that seemingly have, you know, very large claims, and, you know, after the work is done, they have, you know, slightly smaller claims, and vice versa. A client might seem as if they have a small claim, but, you know, after the work is done, have very large claims. So it's very difficult to say at the outset. That is really a process that requires a lot of different, like I said, experts to do their work. A lot of and only after that work is done are you able to, you know, see what type of compensation that each client is deserving of.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I won't push for a figure. There's going to be a lot of anxiety, of course, for when this process can finally start. Given the outstanding questions that you might have, the families might have, when do you reckon you'll be ready to finally file the papers?
Yeah, so, you know, we've got an internal timeline, you know, and deadlines that we're working on. You know, I think we've just received instructions from these clients this and last week. We have a team of, I think, 4 lawyers now working on it, and you know, a team of paralegals as well assisting. So I think, you know, staff complement is large, and we are going to work as hard as possible and as quick as possible to make sure we do what we need to do to get this case moving.
By this month, perhaps?
I think a lot of the investigation will be done this month and next month, and I think you'll probably see a claim or at least you know, letters of demand going out in the next month and a half to 2 months. Yeah.
Right, fair enough.
Okay.
Zain Lundell, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Really do appreciate it. It's an incredibly complex, tragic story, and as you've mentioned, one that could have been avoided. We appreciate your laying out some of those salient points for us.